Hi, Randy.
Good morning, Melanie. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. It's sunny and beautiful here in Lampeter.
It is. We can see the sun reflecting on the walls behind you.
Yeah, if you could see a bit clearer, you could see the dust motes floating in the air.
I didn't want to say anything.
Well, we've got some interesting passages coming up, haven't we? Luke chapter 12.
It's incredibly interesting, isn't it? And the layers in this section that we've got today are immense and different ways
Mm.
of reading it. And
Mm.
also how the block that it's in, there's been this shift now. Jesus is talking about who do you follow? What are your priorities? It comes in this block of that sort of teaching of Luke 12, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a shame we haven't had the preceding verses, isn't it? Because you've actually got Jesus giving a killer sermon.
Right.
Um, and he's got a really hard-hitting message because the verses just before ours, I tell you, everyone who acknowledges me before others, the Son of Man will acknowledge before the angels of God. But whoever denies me before others will be denied before the angels of God. And everyone who speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. So you've got this sort of hard hitting, are you acknowledging me or not? And
Yeah.
what you'd hope if you delivered sort of that kind of sermon, you'd preached it with a really big altar call, come to Jesus and live, or whatever. Um, you expect a response. And Jesus
Hmm.
gets a response, but maybe it's not quite the one he'd be expecting. It's a bit like when you've done a great sermon and somebody comes up with a completely irrelevant question at the end or something which contradicts everything you've said, and you just go like face palm because you've got a bloke speaks up out of the audience, don't you? Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me."
Hmm.
So he's disregarding all this spiritual stuff and all this, who are you going to follow? Where are you going to be in eternity? Whatever. Bam. I want the money.
Yeah.
But it is so
But
real, isn't it?
I know I was just about to add, it again shows the earthiness of scripture, because this is it's a situation we've all been in. You preach something that is spiritually challenging, and someone comes up to you with, back down to, well, what about me, me, money, money, money? So, reality of life. It's wonderful, isn't it? Just how earthy scripture can be and practical and real.
Yeah. And, inheritance, though, how many funerals have you done where the family's been warring over
Oh,
money?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's a huge issue, isn't it? When people die, who's getting this and who's getting that, and it can be unpleasant and divisions can arise that are never healed.
Yeah, yeah. And this guy, he doesn't want healing, does he? He wants the money, not the healing, the money. And that's why he comes to Jesus. So, Jesus, the legal expert, the scribe, to tell him the right answer to get Jesus on his side.
Because rabbis did make those sort of decisions, didn't they? In one sense, it's not an unreasonable thing to ask Jesus, but it kind of is when you listen to what Jesus has been teaching about. Because this
Hmm.
man's thoughts are not on eternity, they're not on where his heart is. They're on his they're on money. They're on what he wants for his life now. And so, Jesus says, "Who sent me to be a judge or arbiter over you?" And there's an irony in that, isn't there?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Because he is the
That's
judge, and he will be judging this man as he'll judge us all, but not about who should have what money in a family,
yeah.
about where you'll be in eternity.
I can't remember one of the writers, one of the commentators just makes the point that this this guy, this brother, comes wanting in his eyes justice. It's about it's about justice, and he wants his justice, and that can sometimes be, we sometimes do the same thing, we dress something up as wanting justice, whereas actually it's actually about covetousness. That's what's underneath, and that's what Jesus is trying to expose here, or going on to expose.
Mm.
Um, but it's about, he's also illustrating how, this rich man just dresses up his own covetousness as wanting justice.
Jesus can see through that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which also the rest of the passage illustrates, because the man in the parable, the man is talking to himself, and it's thought processes, but Jesus knows what's going on in the head as well. What we think in secret.
Mm. But
Jesus
this,
knows what's going on.
he does. But this issue of covetousness, it's really interesting. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And JC Ryle makes the point, if you want a JC Ryle,
Go on, give us a JC Ryle.
Yeah, JC Ryle makes the point um, that covetousness is something which is pervasive and
Yeah,
impacts all areas of life and all humanity right from the very beginning.
yeah.
He says it would be safe to say that there is no sin to which the heart is more prone than covetousness.
Hmm.
It was this sin which helped cast down the angels who fell. They were not content with their first estate, they coveted something better. It was this sin which helped drive Adam and Eve out of paradise and bring death into the world. Our first parents were not satisfied with the things which God gave them in Eden. They coveted, and so they fell. It is a sin which, ever since the fall, has been the fertile cause of misery and unhappiness upon earth. Wars, quarrels, strifes, divisions, envyings, disputes, jealousies, hatreds of all sorts, both public and private, may nearly all be traced up to this fountainhead.
Yeah. And what we do is we will present a legitimate concern, but behind it, the real thing is, as Ryle's getting at, our covetousness. That's what's in our heart. That's what's in our hearts. Although we will dress it up in some other sort of something that's legitimate. So you could say this guy dresses it up as wanting justice. He wants what's his, perfectly fair or legal. But actually, what it's revealing is, or what's underneath it is covetousness. What Ryle's exactly saying.
And it's also what Jay John says. I don't know if you've ever done his series of studies on the Ten Commandments, just 10. The point which has always stuck with me from the very first time I did that course with a group of people is the way he says that actually the commandments, in a way, should be the other way up, because covetousness is
Yeah,
behind all of the other sins.
yeah,
It
yeah,
challenges you to, when you're in a dispute, or when you're unhappy, or whatever it is, he challenges you to think, actually, what am I coveting? What am
yeah,
I after here? Um, and to use that to help you to sort of think about it and pray about it and see what's going on behind the surface. Because it's not just that we're trying to mask it to others, we mask it to ourselves.
hmm,
That actually what's going on here is I'm coveting people's good opinion, or
hmm,
I'm coveting power, or I'm, in this guy's chance, I'm coveting money and what that can buy, and I think that's really challenging, and that's a really important thing for us all, because we can look at this guy and we can go, oh yeah, yeah, of course this guy is greedy and tut tut tut, but what are we coveting? What's
yeah,
going on behind our thinking?
yeah. And the other thing I like about these early verses of this reading, um, sort of this guy in the crowd, he wants Jesus on his side in this dispute. So we want Jesus on our side. And in a way, he's using Jesus. It's sort of like saying to Jesus, look, Jesus, I want you to solve my problems, but I don't want you to change my heart. Um, so what is your problem? So change my problem, but don't change my heart. So be on my side, sort the problem, but don't change me. Sort of the next challenge over. And you know how often we do exactly the same thing, that we want to use Jesus, we want Jesus on our side, but we don't want Jesus changing us, challenging us. That's going a little bit too far.
And it's a very modern problem, isn't it? This possessions thing, because we're in a culture now, you've got to have the most up to date smartphone and, this and that, isn't it? People are very desirous of having all of this sort of stuff. And I think as we get older, it doesn't get any easier because people judge you on the car you drive, don't they, for example, or
Hmm.
where your house is,
Yeah,
things like that. People still call their where they live by a different name sometimes if the neighbouring place is a bit posher. Because we coveting that place in that posher area because we want people to think better of us. We want to be affluent, and that's
yeah,
that's the goal in life. But of course, that's not the goal in life, says Jesus. There's more things, more important things than the stuff you've got. Interestingly, Plutarch, greed never rests from an acquiring of more.
mm,
There you go. But
yeah,
it's true, isn't it? Because once you've got, you always want the next thing. That latest phone that you so want, you've got it within 3 months. They brought out the next model, haven't they?
that's right. That's
That
right.
that brand new car, well, within a few weeks, it's got so many miles on the clock, and you're like, oh,
And it's lost nearly half its value.
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
with cars for sure, for
yeah.
sure. But Bock makes an interesting point about possessions. Listen to this. This
Mm,
is a good quote too. He says, when possessions are the goal, people become pawns. In fact, a reversal of the created order occurs as those made in the living image of God come to serve dead non images.
right.
That's an
Mm,
interesting way of looking at it, isn't it? Because that shows it, what Jay John was saying. It's actually a form of idolatry, isn't it?
mm, yeah,
This covetousness and you're
yeah,
making possessions more
yeah.
important than God, and that's
Which,
idolatry.
yeah, which takes us right to the very end of the passage about, where what you're going to worship. Where's your heart going to be?
Mhm.
With an idol or with the living God? Um, yeah,
That's exactly what Jesus is getting at because, he knows that the possessions we've got are temporal and that
yeah.
eternity with him is all the treasures of heaven. He knows
No,
that, but we somehow struggle to grasp it.
yeah. And that what sort of that kind of says in another way what Dale Ralph Davis with this passage he has a really interesting he brings out how this guy in the parable the false estimates that he has. So he sort of says, well, this guy has a false estimate of blessing, he has a false estimate of time, he has a false estimate of purpose, he has a false estimate of control, which is one I found really interesting because that's one of the pressures of our society today. We want to be in control of everything. And Jesus says, well, or Dale Ralph Davis says, that's one of the things this guy is illustrating. He thinks he's in control, and Jesus is saying, whoa, no, you're not. We think we're in control. We're the masters of our destiny. And sort of Jesus is saying, oh, no, you're not. And then Ralph Davis says, there's a fifth false estimate, a false estimate of value. And you can sort of see all those things in our world. But it was the one thing about control that really resonated with me, oh, with today's culture. Sorry, I am still here. The camera's just fallen over. There we are.
But yeah, control, because that is, these debates that are happening about assisted suicide.
Yeah,
That's about control, isn't it? I
yeah.
want to have control of the end of my life. And actually, Jesus is saying you can't have control over that.
No, no. So we have a false estimate of time. We think, thanks to medical technology, you know, I'm going to live for another 20, 30 years. You know, what's going to kill me? I cycle every day. I eat an apple a day, blah, blah, blah. But, Jesus says, well, hang on a minute. You're not in control of time. I am,
Mm.
etc., etc. And yeah, I just thought that was a really interesting way of taking this parable, how the man just shows all these different false estimates of things, and then
Mhm.
how we can sort of do exactly the same thing
And do.
and do the same thing. Yeah, yeah.
You can see that the focus is off. You can see that straight away with the man in the parable, because there's six eyes and five mice.
Now there's another interesting question, isn't there? If you read the commentaries, because you're right. And some commentaries, make that point that you could say it's about self-centeredness, as you said, the six eyes, the five mice. But then other commentators, so I think it's what's his name, Kenneth Bailey in Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes, he says, don't major that because it's actually a manner of speaking at the time. Um, so it's a sort of style of language that's common at that time. So he said, just be cautious about how much you major that, which is
But that,
interesting. I thought again that was interesting.
nevertheless, the focus for this guy is himself, isn't it? Because
Hmm.
even if you took out that sort of that point of the eyes and the mice, he's still obviously only interested in himself, because he's like, oh, I've got all of this great harvest this year. What am I going to do with this harvest? Well, what could he have done with the harvest? He could have asked God. He could have said, thank you, Lord, for this wonderful harvest. What would you like me to do with it?
Hmm.
Or he could have decided, even without asking God, he could have thought, well, there are people who haven't had such a good harvest down the road. I can help them. I can make it, I can sell it, and I can do something useful with it. There's lots of things he could have done with this. But what he does do is he says, well, I'm going to make, you know, I'm going to put it away, and I'm going to make sure that I can have this to look after me for ages. I won't have to work. I can sit down, I can relax, eat, drink, and be merry. His focus is on the temporal and himself.
Kenneth Bailey makes another interesting point here that sort of ties into your starting point. Bailey says that in that culture at that time, you wouldn't have talked to yourself. You'd have been surrounded by friends and family. That culture was that you would talk to them. Everything in your life would be minutely discussed. Everyone knew everybody else's business. So if you were making decisions, you'd sit down, you'd chat to your mates about it, you'd chat to your family about it. And Bailey then makes the point that actually this man is quite a sad man because he presumes this guy doesn't have any friends or family to sit down and chat to. He's actually quite a lonely bloke. And maybe that's reflected in the story. I'm just going to think of myself. Where if that's how he's taken on life, well, no wonder he ain't got any friends to sit and chat it through. But also, what's kind of interesting is that verse 17, I have no place to store my crops. Hang on a minute, whose crops? Aren't even those crops a gift from God? And yet you're not recognizing that. You're saying they're my crops. No, 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 no. Crops aren't, are they? Who made them grow? Who gave the sun? Who gave the rain? They're actually a gift from God. So even his very starting point of this sad, lonely individual, his very starting point is wrong.
But isn't that where we start with our possessions?
Yeah,
And isn't that one of the problems when we start talking about stewardship in church life? Is this is my money,
yeah,
I'll give it to what I see fit. So I'm not going to
yeah,
give my money into the general funds because I don't want it to go on ministry share. I'll give my money to a project that I like. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Don't we
yeah,
hear that a lot? And it's the same attitude, isn't it? It's assuming that these possessions are yours, but they're
yeah,
not.
yeah,
All that we have comes from God. We've
yeah,
we've if we've earned it, we've had a good agile mind or a strong body. We've our intellect comes from God. All of these things, the opportunities we've been given, they're by
yeah,
God's grace. So all of this comes from God, and we
yeah,
give back to Him. That's the whole idea of Christian giving, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Rooted in
yeah,
that.
yeah. And then we get, as you said a few moments ago, we get that false estimate of purpose right at the end. What's the purpose of life? Oh, the purpose of life is take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Well, Jesus is kind of saying, well, And what's interesting is that some of the writers say, well, it's Ecclesiastes, that's where it comes from. But of course, he misquotes the preacher, because the preacher in Ecclesiastes then takes it on to show his dependence upon God, which is interesting because we'll come to it later because that's where the psalm comes in. But hey ho, um, I've just lost my train of thought there, Melanie. Eat, drink, and be merry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, the preacher in Ecclesiastes um, takes that back to God, whereas this man doesn't. So,
Mhm.
so certainly Dale Ralph Davis is saying, he has a false estimate, he has a false idea of what life is all about. But again, that's a reflection of our culture today, isn't it?
Oh,
We want
absolutely.
these labor-saving gadgets. We want the money to buy them so we can take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. So we want that robotic lawnmower that costs a couple of £1,000. So it'll cut the grass for us while we sit there on our sunbed drinking our glass of Pimm's or whatever is your
Speak for
particular
yourself.
tipple. Sorry?
Speak for yourself.
I haven't had Pimm's in years.
But that is our culture, though, isn't it? You're thinking about retirement. What do people hope for in retirement? Oh,
Yeah,
people to be able to relax, to go on cruises, to enjoy life, because we've spent the other years working hard. Yeah, that's
yeah, yeah,
not thought to actually in my retirement. I mean, some people do because I've got some wonderful retired people who serve the church wholeheartedly. Um,
yeah,
but many people don't think, well, I can retire now and then I can serve God in a much more concentrated way. I can give my time to God,
yeah.
grow in His church.
Hmm.
Lots of people don't think like that. Lots of Christians don't think like that.
Yeah,
I've had Christians who were away for half the year living somewhere else.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah,
also had others who did it because they had no other option and were wonderful, godly people. But this is how society tells us we should be looking, isn't it? And we get sucked
yeah,
into it as Christians often.
yeah, 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 yeah.
We need
And
to be
then
rich
God,
towards God. That's what Jesus says.
yeah, and then God speaks. God speaks, and you don't get that often in these parables that God directly speaks, and that's how serious God takes what this parable's about.
Mm.
Control. No, you're not in control. What's the purpose of life? Well, you're wrong, etc., etc. Getting more, you're wrong. It's so serious that God speaks.
And he
I
says,
just
you fool.
He says, "You fool," which is quite an insult.
Well, yeah, well, Jesus talks about calling people you fool, doesn't he?
Yeah,
And says it's like committing murder, whatever.
yeah. And again, I think it's Kenneth Bailey makes the point. that but God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you." And Bailey says that that phrase, "be demanded from you," is the same language as the return of a loan. And Bailey goes on to make the point that this very night, your life, even your life, is a gift from God. But we don't recognize that. It's a loan from God. And God can call in that loan anytime he wants to call in that loan.
Yeah. And people are
Yeah,
shocked by that because people feel they've got a right to a certain life length of life and quality of life. But
yeah,
all that we've comes from God. It's by his grace
yeah,
that we've
yeah.
got God.
I'm in control. And the more medical science, whatever advances, so the more control I can have. So I have a right to this. I have a right to that. I have a right to the other because I'm in control. And God says, no, 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 no.
You do,
It's a
he says.
gift. It's a loan. And I can call that back in anytime I want to.
It's interesting. Well, when we were in Orkney, we went to St Magnus's Cathedral in Orkney, which is beautiful,
Right,
and very early. 12th century, I think, something like that. But there's a whole batch of gravestones there along the side of the church, which date from the 17th century.
right,
And they're in the fashion of the sort of memento mori. So they've got all skulls and things at the bottom of them. There's different emblems. There's a skull, a candle, a spade, a time, an hourglass.
right.
All things to remind people that they are mortal and that where that person has gone, they're going to go as well.
Yeah,
And I think our culture is so the opposite of that, isn't it, today? Especially with these sorts of no fuss cremations where you don't even have a service, you just pack the body off.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And there's nothing they've just got because we don't even want to think about it. Whereas I think the guys in the 17th century, though it's a bit macabre, actually had a really good point. They're saying, look, sort your life out now because tomorrow you could be like me.
Yeah,
That's kind of what
yeah, yeah,
Jesus is saying, isn't he? He's saying, look, you need to be right with God. That's what's important, not how many possessions you've got, because you're not going to take them with you when you go.
yeah,
You need to be right with God. That's the most important thing out of life.
yeah.
JC Rao's got a great quote about being rich towards God. Do you want it?
Yeah, of course I do.
Right. He says, when can it be said of a man that he is rich towards God? Never till he is rich in grace, rich in faith, rich in good works. Never till he is applied to Jesus Christ and bought of him gold tried in the fire. Never till he has a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Never till he has a name inscribed in the book of life and is an heir of God and joint heir with Christ. Such a man is truly rich. His treasure is incorruptible. His bank never breaks. His inheritance fadeth not away. Man cannot deprive him of it. Death cannot snatch it out of his hands. All things are his already life, death, things present, and things to come. And best of all, what he has now is nothing to what he will have hereafter. Riches like these are within reach of every sinner who will come to Christ and receive them. May we never rest until they are ours.
Yeah, yeah,
Fantastic. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
yeah,
That's the future for us.
yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The question comes though, if I'm not storing up my riches, if I'm giving it away, because that's kind
Hmm.
of the implication. Actually, what should he have done with this bounty? Well, he should have used it to help somebody else, shouldn't he? Um, it sort of leads into the next passage because the next passage that we'll look at next week is about trusting God to take
Hmm.
care of us,
Yeah,
because that's also where this underlying this you've got the covetousness, but you've also got the fear that God won't provide.
yeah. A fear of insecurity, isn't it?
You know, that there
Yeah,
won't be enough food tomorrow. If
yeah,
I give this money to the church, will I be able to pay my next bill?
Yeah.
Or what if I need to do the roof? Or what if my car breaks down? Will I be able to pay for that if I've given my money to help somebody else? So
Yeah.
so Jesus tackles that in the next section. Challenging though, isn't it? Because you can I can feel it pointing at me, various things and attitudes.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a little bit about the psalm?
Go on then.
Psalm 107, which is otherwise known as the Pilgrim Psalm, because it's the psalm supposedly the pilgrims who went to the United States, the Sunday before they landed, so they actually landed on a Monday. So the Sunday, this was the psalm they used as part of their worship. So it's called the Pilgrim Psalm. It's the context of the psalm could be they're regathering the people after Babylon, after the exile, or and so the theme is about thanking God for deliverance from exile, or some writers think it's talking about the Exodus. But what's really interesting, so verse 2, it starts with, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. So, first question obviously is, well, am I part of the redeemed? If I am, the psalmist goes on, well, so give thanks. But what's really interesting is, well, the psalm itself is broken into four different situations. And in this Sunday, we get verses 1 to 9, which is about homelessness. And so, gathering the people together into a home. But what's interesting is that each of these four sections have the similar structure. And the structure is particularly, as it's something I've been doing sort of a little bit of thinking about at the moment over the last month or so, is it starts with the people in crisis. So they were hungry and thirsty, their lives ebbed away, they're in crisis. It turns to prayer. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble. Um, God then revives. He led them by a straight way to a city where they could settle. And it ends with giving thanks. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love, which if we relate back to the rich man in the gospel reading, it's again reminding, our possessions or the blessings that we've received, that they've come from God, and our response should be to give thanks to him, which of course the rich fool doesn't see. But that's what sort of what one of the points of this psalm, and of course the psalm culminates in verse 43, which the lectionary writers add on. So the passage for Sunday is verses 1 to 9, then verse 43, which is the climax of the psalm, about the people then rejoicing. But in each of the four sections, you get this same pattern. Crisis leads to prayer. Where are we with God? We examine our relationship with God. God then brings renewal or blessing, and our appropriate response then is 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 to give thanks to Him. I just found that a wonderful structure of the psalm, and our own one would pray our own experience that when we are at rock bottom, whether that's physically or mentally, spiritually, emotionally, that it drives us to prayer. We have the certainty, the experience of the exile or the exodus, that God's going to revive us. But our response isn't the rich man, just accumulate, grab more. We turn and give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love, for his wonderful deeds, how he satisfies, how he fills, etc., etc.
Of course, there's one vital difference, isn't there? Because the psalm is coming out of a situation of crisis, whereas this man is in a situation of blessing. And Ryle makes this quote. He says, Riches destroy far more souls than poverty.
Indeed.
It's in the good times that we're actually at most danger of moving away from Jesus.
Yeah. Our
Mm.
complacency,
Mm.
comfortableness.
Yeah. There we are. So are you preaching on this then?
I am. I am. I am. In
Very
fact,
good.
Melanie, I think I'm preaching twice on it in two
Ooh,
different places
oh, get
that
you.
Sunday. Yeah.
Glad to see the archdeacons are having a taster of what the rest of us do every week.
Right. Okay. Well, have a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy preaching on it.
And you.
Bye bye.